Welcome to the Crazy Chicken People podcast. If you're crazy about chickens, then you're in the right place. What's going on, chicken people? I've got an important episode lined up for you today that I've really wanted to do for a while. This is one that really tugged at my heartstrings as I put it together and kind of took me on a roller coaster of emotions as I thought back to past experiences. We all know that the world of factory egg farming is far from pretty. It's downright ugly. The thought of all those poor hens, birds born with the same desire to peck and scratch, to live with other chickens and feel like part of a chicken family, all just wanting to be loved, but instead are forced to spend their days confined to cages, never getting to feel the sun on their feathers, restricted from ever getting to scratch or roll around in the dirt. If you care about chickens like I do, if you care about animals at all, it can be enough to make you sick. And even though there's people like us out there raising our own chickens, collecting and sharing the eggs that come from happy, well-cared-for hens, trying to make a small difference by cutting off our own dependency on factory-farmed eggs, there's still billions of chickens that'll never get to see the outdoors, never get to find their own worm or feel any kind of happiness, and it sucks. There's no two ways about it. And unless there's some kind of global catastrophe that lands us all living in some kind of post-apocalyptical world, the continued increase in population and industrialization, coupled with the decreased need to embrace self-sufficient living, is really only going to make things worse. But I didn't do this episode to focus on the dark side of factory farming and bum you all out. Instead, I want to shine a spotlight on the people out there working tirelessly to rescue and rehabilitate these forgotten birds. These spent hens, as the industry refers to them, and offer the opportunity to people like us to be part of the solution. Because these factory egg farms operate only to produce the maximum number of eggs possible while spending as little money on feed, space for chickens, or medical care as possible, most of the hens who go through those places are discarded after just a couple years, maybe even less than that as they start to dip from their peak production numbers. Sometimes they get sent to slaughter. Sometimes they're thrown out, treated no better than yesterday's trash. And this happens tens of millions of times a year in the US alone. But sometimes, for the lucky ones, they find their way to a place like Hen Harbor, a nonprofit based in Santa Cruz, California that for over a decade has been not just rescuing spent hens from death, but also fighting for their rights to a decent life by urging lawmakers to enforce regulations already in place and take a look at some of the laws that, for some reason, make it legal to treat a living thing so poorly. Even in a world that seems to be getting uglier by the day, there's still people out there that care enough about these animals to dedicate their lives to trying to rescue them. People like Zoe Rosenberg, who at the age of 11 started Happy Hen Sanctuary. Now, don't tell Zoe that one person can't make a difference, because over the last 8 years, she's been able to turn out what started as a simple passion project into a legitimate sanctuary that saved the lives of over 1,000 animals, many of them chickens whose lives would have otherwise been thrown away. And there's so many more just like this. Even in Sin City, if you look past the lights of the casinos, you'll find a couple acres where animals are being rescued from the darkness of factory farms and chickens are moved from the 70 square inches of space they were given in a battery cage to living free lives with each other in the desert countryside. 70 inches of space. That's what's required to house a chicken in a cage its entire life. That's less than the space of a regular-sized sheet of paper. It's no wonder that when some of these chickens finally do find their way out, a lot of them can have a really hard time adapting to life outside of a cage. Even though a lot of battery chickens are kept in a cage with another chicken or maybe two, the super tight conditions, living a life of constant stress where hens are frequently pecking at each other or pulling each other's feathers out, never having a chance to get a bath or even to relax, that would do some psychological damage to any living thing, even driving it to insanity. And sadly, the way I described it leaves out some of the worst parts. But I don't think we need to get that dark. And that's what makes these places I'm talking about, places like All Friends Animal Sanctuary in Las Vegas, so amazing. People willing to dedicate their lives, not just to give these animals a home, but to have the patience and be willing to put in the work to rehabilitate them, to get them back physically and mentally healthy enough to live a normal, happy life, or to be adopted out to someone who appreciates how precious that life actually is. People like Tiffany, who run the chicken rescue in Round Top, Texas. They take in chickens that have escaped the slaughterhouse, roosters that have been abandoned or rescued from cockfighting circles, and hens that would have otherwise been discarded by egg production factories who saw them as used up and no longer worth keeping alive. I actually had a chance to talk to Tiffany a bit. We had an interesting conversation. Back when I had first started podcasting, I thought that doing interview shows was going to be really fun and how most of my episodes would go. So I had reached out to her. Now, later on, it ended up that I veered away from doing the interviews. I just didn't really like all the editing, and it was really hard to make the time for it. But talking to Tiffany was kind of eye-opening for me, getting the perspective from someone who has a very different view on things than I do. I can still remember one of our first conversations really clearly. After I had first approached her about possibly being on the show, I had asked her to listen to one of my first episodes just to get an idea of who I was, why I was doing the show, things like that. I was still pretty nervous about the whole thing back then, and getting any positive feedback really helped keep me going. And after she listened, the next time we talked, she came right out and said that she had a real problem with some of the things I had brought up. And I remember getting this feeling in my stomach like, oh, geez, what did I say? And she just very honestly let me know, being someone who's taken in dozens of unwanted roosters and sees how often they get discarded by people who only wanted hens, and coming from the perspective of someone who lives a vegan lifestyle, she just couldn't be on board with someone who was promoting hatching chicks and creating more animals that would eventually be abused or neglected in her experience. And I could totally respect that. I may not agree with it, but how am I going to tell someone who sees the ugly side of the chicken industry and actually spends her time trying to make it better that she's wrong? I'm super grateful for all the people out there doing what Tiffany does, knowing that because of the work they put in, that thousands of chickens and other farm animals every year are able to find new homes with families that are willing to take on a little extra burden to give them a new chance at life. You know, it actually reminds me of something that Jacob Franklin had said when I had him on this show a while back. You might remember him and Sarah from the Revolution podcast or their YouTube channel, or maybe heard them at the Backyard Chicken Summit if you check that out. I had asked him on this show what their goal was for the Revolution, and I remember he said, to change the world. That's pretty lofty goals for sure, and I hope they make it happen. But what if you could change the world just for one chicken? Or for two chickens? And that's really what I wanted to get into in this episode. With spring and chick season now in full swing, I know that a lot of people are getting ready to get a new batch of chicks and start raising new members of their flock. But I think it would be awesome if some of us at least considered adopting out some of these rescue chickens too. So I do want to talk a little bit about what that process involves and provide a few resources for anyone who's interested in finding out more about it. And look, I'm not trying to force this on you guys. I realize that for a lot of people, bringing in an adoption animal just isn't an option for one reason or another. So I'm not asking you to go out and adopt today. Although, as David Wooderson would have said, it'd be a lot cooler if you did. Okay, a few things to think about first if you do look into adoption. When you first bring a chicken into your flock that's spent the beginning of its life in prison, there's a good chance it's going to come with some baggage, some specific needs depending on how far along it's come recovering from that trauma. They may have ongoing health issues that weren't fully resolved before being made available for adoption, but this usually isn't the case. You're not going to be sent home with a bird that's currently sick, but there could be some physical limitations. It could have had a broken leg or a wing at some point and may not be able to get around as other birds. Some factory-raised chickens get parts of their beaks clipped off to prevent them from hurting other chickens, and this could make it tougher for them to eat certain feeds and get the nutrition they need. And there could be some behavioral challenges that still need to be addressed. A hen that spent its life in a cage, being mistreated, and just generally uncared for is going to struggle a little bit with trusting people again. Hopefully, a lot of that has been worked through by the time they're available for adoption. That's one of the things these rescues and the people that work with these animals focus on and are really good at. But the trauma is always going to be there. I've never adopted a rescue chicken, at least not yet. But my wife and I did volunteer at the SPCA for a while back before we had kids and got a lot of training and explanation of how these formerly abused animals can take to their new lives. And sometimes they just never fully recover from those negative experiences. Providing them with proper housing, nutrition, and the healthcare they need is the first steps, but those are basics that all animals need anyways. But rescue pets can take a little bit more work. This could mean having to feed them in a special way, providing them a little bit more space when they need it, or maybe some extra attention and love if they're ready for that. And let me say, while I haven't had the opportunity to care for a chicken that's been through the kind of stuff some of these birds have, I did spend a lot of hours at the SPCA shelter caring for cats that came through there, having also experienced some pretty bad trauma. There are few things as rewarding as making a breakthrough with an animal that's lost its trust for people, and seeing that animal make that change and start to turn that corner. Whether you're adopting a hen that's been thrown out of an egg farm, a dog that was abandoned and left for dead, a cat, whatever it might be, you're not just providing these animals with a chance at a better life, but you're probably also going to experience a very deep sense of fulfillment and satisfaction from this. It is so rewarding to see a positive impact that you can make on an animal's life. And in the case of these hens, you can help to raise awareness about the ethical concerns surrounding factory farming practices and the treatment of these animals in industrial agriculture. If you've ever adopted an animal or know somebody who has, I've heard people who have rescued animals before from bad situations say, "I didn't save my dog, he saved me." There is absolutely something to that. I believe that those animals know full well that they were once in an awful situation, and they appreciate the love and the care that they get just a little bit more, at least in my opinion. If you are interested in adopting a chicken, and I hope that you'll at least think about it, there's a bunch of places that can help with this. I named off a few that had caught my attention while I was looking them up and happened to be fairly close to me, but there's small rescues in just about every state. There's the Adopt-A-Bird Network, who I think is nationwide. They also do a lot to help educate people about these animals. They go around to schools and have a bunch of cool programs. And, if adopting isn't your thing, but you still want to help, there's a bunch of ways you can do that too. And it doesn't have to be just financially. Local shelters are almost always looking for volunteers, and a lot of them will actually open up and allow visitors in just to come and hang out with the animals and give them a little bit of socialization. You might have some things laying around the house that you could donate that could really help the place out. And a lot of these places even use affiliate links, so if you do some online shopping, maybe they can get a little kickback on it. I'm going to post links to a few of the places in the show notes so that you guys can check them out. I really hope you do. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I wanted to say thank you to everyone that's been sharing the show out lately. I have noticed it and appreciate it. And thank you for all the messages this last week about the different conspiracy theories you guys are into. It's always nice to know that I'm not alone out there, so keep them coming. You guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you later.